Hi there, guys, and welcome to another edition of the Wise Crypto Sunday Special with me, your host, Chris Coney. Back with me again is the lovely Marija. Marija, welcome back to the Sunday Special.
Hello, Chris. Thank you for having me.
The perfect guest for today. We're going to be talking about, I've called it the state of NFTs. This is kind of something we're going to have to talk about periodically because it's a rapidly moving space, as most of crypto is. But I thought we'd talk about the NFT space in general and then what's the current trends and hot topics within that. So considering this is the first time we've spoken about NFTs on the Sunday Special, let's set a bit of an education piece first, and then we can go into some more details. So we're in this age of tokenization. So can you like lay out in the most general terms what the NFT space is all about?
Well, NFT space is about tokenization, but tokenization is a wider subject. Tokenization is a method of converting physical and digital assets into tokens. So into converting rights to an asset to a token. And I would say we have a fungible type of tokenization. We also have a non-fungible type. NFTs are non-fungible type, which means they're not interchangeable. They have different values. Each NFT, each non-fungible token has a different value. Like you mentioned once, a used car cannot be exchanged for another used car because they have different features, such as number of kilometers and things like that. So they have unique values. They're not divisible, and they're called NFTs. But we also have tokenization of fungible things, like, for example, tokenization of gold, which means that each token can be exchanged for another, and or I don't know, stocks and things like that. So which can be fungible, like Bitcoin is fungible, like dollar is fungible. Yep. $1 is always worth another dollar.
It doesn't matter which dollar you get, right? But what's the difference if you tokenize gold or a stock or something? What's the difference between tokenizing it and having it as a piece of paper that like a share certificate that represents it? Is tokenization specifically turning it into a crypto token? Is that what we're talking about?
Tokenization of gold or of stocks is a specific thing. Basically, crypto people are trying to show to the traditional markets that it's much easier to trade these items, these assets as tokens. And it's also about fractional ownership as well. For example, stocks can be traded when they're tokenized. They can be you can trade a fraction of a stock, and it's just the speed of it's the usage, the speed, holding it in your wallet, etc. It's very easy. It's much more easier to acquire, to trade, and to use.
Okay.
I don't think there's of course, immutability of the blockchain, of the ownership, things like that. But yeah, I would say it's the future probably.
Okay, sure. So with tokenization, it's like creating a token that represents another asset, whereas sometimes the token and the asset are the same thing. Like you could say Ethereum is a token, but it is also the asset. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, crypto assets. I mean, yeah.
They are digital tokens, but they are the asset as well. Whereas a stock, it might have a digital token, but it represents something elsewhere. Like a used car might be tokenized, but the token isn't the asset. It just represents it.
Represents it, exactly. When it's a physical thing which exists outside of the digital world, it's just a representation of giving the rights to a token holder of that asset.
So
that's why it's very important to say that sometimes, most of the times, tokenization is like securitization, and it's it's basically many of those tokens are securities, in fact, and that's why it's very, very difficult to tokenize real estate. It's not difficult to tokenize it in terms of how to make the token and put it on a blockchain, but it's difficult and complicated because it involves, government laws. You have to change the laws related to cadastre, to all these agencies and institutions where you need to register your real estate and things like that, So basically, it's some real world assets are easier to tokenize than others. And many of the assets, real world assets that you would like to tokenize, you simply can't unless there is a regulation already in place for that to happen.
Totally.
Or you can do it in some crypto-friendly jurisdiction that already is kind of solving that issue and working on that. But yeah,
that's
it's not so simple.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that. You made a distinction there, which is perhaps naively that a lot of people in crypto have just considered that you can do tokenization without securitization, which actually that might be a mistake, because just tokenizing it doesn't mean it's not a security. It might well be, and the tokenization is just adding a piece of technology to it. It doesn't get you out of it being a security. That's kind of fascinating. So it's already a security. If you choose to tokenize it, well, that's just, like you say, turning it into putting it on technology rails that make it divisible, easier to transfer, and so on. But that's got nothing to do with securitization, because that's a regulatory thing. So that's very interesting indeed. So that's all in the realm of like tokenizing assets. So when we get into, go on, you got something to say on that?
Yeah, that's why I think NFT or tokenization of digital assets has kind of became very popular and successful. It's much easier to do it, and it's because it doesn't really involve so much of the external laws and things like that.
Yeah, very true. So yeah, I'd written down like 4 major categories that like tokens fall into, or digital tokens, like digital art, collectibles is another one, playable NFTs, and then asset titles. So we just did the asset title bit. The asset titles piece, that's the tokenization of assets, which is in the realm of regulation and securities, right, which already exists. So that's that. But when it comes to tokenizing, say, digital art, well, artworks, they weren't a security anyway. So that's not a concern, is it? You just get the benefits of tokenization without the securitization. That's going to be my favorite phrase now. You've given me that. I'm going to be spreading that all over the place and claiming it as my own. I won't. So yeah. So let's talk about so NFTs. Most of the headlines and all of the hype around NFTs has been pretty much in those other 3 categories of digital artworks, collectibles, and what I call playable NFTs, which are like in-game items and so on. So what are some of the most popular specific projects in these realms that you've heard of that you can tell us about?
Well, related to art, many of them are overlapping, and they're also some of them have a gamification aspect added to them, which is quite interesting. But yeah, for example, art projects which are very popular, maybe hash masks, and hash masks is a collection of maybe 16,000 artworks. They were done by, I'm not sure, 77 artists, but we still don't know who they are, right. Plus the artificial intelligence. And some of them have similar features, some are rarer than the others, but all of them are unique. And it's quite interesting because it has a gamification aspect to it. And it's a great project, I think. And then you have, for example, what's popular regarding in-game items. Well, you have, I don't know, metaverses are very popular, like the Decentraland, where you can buy a plot of land and or other in-game items, and these kind of metaverse projects are very, very popular in crypto. And they can be very useful also for companies to advertise themselves in these virtual realities, because they can buy, I don't know, a piece of land or an island or a planet in this virtual reality, and put their advertising there. Because us who are using those spaces and who spend time there for this and that reason, we may see it. And
That's a good one. That's a good one. So
there are a lot of uses which are not immediately visible or understandable.
They're not obvious,
but they are obvious, yes.
Yeah.
But we are going to use virtual reality more and more. That's for sure.
So like Coca-Cola Island in Decentraland, or any of the big brands, because what they'll do is they'll go wherever people's attention is. So if there's more people turning, like you just said, towards virtual reality, well, they're going to have to advertise wherever the eyeballs are pointing. That's always been the way.
Exactly.
The other thing you kind of made me think there was with in-game items, things like Fortnite and all the big computer games where you can buy skins and items and swords and whatever else. The biggest objection I've heard from the developers when it comes to making their items into like NFTs and like setting them free outside of a closed ecosystem is they'll lose control. So the V-Bucks token in Fortnite, that is a digital currency that is private to the metaverse within Fortnite, but it's closed. You can't spend the V-Bucks anywhere else. You can only spend them on the items that Epic Games create. But all those items and all the V-Bucks and everything is stuck in the Epic Games universe, right? It's not on a blockchain, none of that. And that's the fear, I suppose, is that those business models rely on them controlling that whole ecosystem. Whereas if they turned the V-Buck into a cryptocurrency, it would be tradable everywhere. But then people might start spending V-Bucks in different games and things like that. But I thought that was one of the benefits of having an NFT that's an in-game item, that might actually end up happening. You'd end up having an item that you found in one game that might find its way into a completely different game, which is mind-blowing for people who, like me, who have been in computer gaming for a long time, and each of the games were sort of their own universes, and now they're sort of blurring the lines with these transferable tokens and such like. So the question I'm getting at there is, why does some developers not have that problem of control, and they'll set their items free, whereas others don't want to do it for that reason?
The first thing, when you said that developers do not want their items to go out of the platform, you're probably right about the reason that you stated, that they don't want them used in another games. I'm not a gamer, so I don't really know. But what I know is that some regulations in some countries are very strict about classification of tokens. So, for example, if your token goes outside of your platform and can be traded on a secondary market, then it's not anymore a digital token, or I don't know, utility token. It doesn't have a classification which is necessary in order to, it's a regulatory thing. So it's for such a huge company, it might be very inconvenient if they allow things like a thing like that, because
That's a very good point.
they're gonna change the classification of their token, and they may go into a very tough regulatory territory.
Totally.
And problems. I'm not sure if this is the issue with Fortnite, but
that does make perfect sense. Generally, that's a very good point. That is a very, very good point. Generally, when these game companies are criticized for being too controlling over like their V-Bucks, we assume that's just for profit, where it might not be. That might be pretty important to the game and to the business model. Like you just said, for example, if they the control that they have is the only way they can ensure that they stay within certain regulatory boundaries. if they don't have control of their items and their own currency, like you said, they risk, and there's nothing they can do about it, those items flowing into jurisdictions and be used in ways that fall foul of regulation, at which point there is nothing they can do. The regulator is going to say your token is being used, to violate regulations, and you're like, it's too late. We've set it free. There's nothing we can do about it. So they won't take that step for that reason. So that is an absolutely superb point you made there. So that makes perfect business sense to me. So even though you said you're not sure if that is the case, it's a pretty good argument, actually. Nice. So let's just skip back one here. We've missed. I made a distinction between digital artworks being one category of NFTs, and you talked about Hashmasks, which I've heard of it, but then when you mentioned it the other day, I looked into it. So that's more in the digital artwork realm with what like you said, a bit of gamification. And as far as I understand that reminds me of CryptoKitties a bit, because those Hashmask artworks, they have a set number of traits like background, eye color, skin color. I think all of them are holding a book of some kind, and they're all the variables. And then all these various artists have made lots and lots of variations of the same square image with a person in it. Sometimes it's male, sometimes it's female, sometimes it's black skin, yellow skin, green skin. Sometimes the book is, the skin is transparent or not. All these things, and you end up with these couple of thousand variations. And then, like you say, through God only knows what determines it, some of the variations become worth more than others. And that's kind of random. That's kind of what happened with CryptoKitties. You could have hats and different skin colors and eyeball colors and all that sort of stuff. And for some, I don't know what reason, certain configurations of CryptoKitty acquired very high values. So the Hashmask one reminded me of that a bit. Do you remember the CryptoKitties thing?
Yeah, I remember. But CryptoKitties, they kind of, there were rules. It wasn't really, the traits were random, but the rarity of the traits, and for example, young virgins who haven't been bred to cats who haven't been bred, they had a higher value with mutations if they had mutations.
Mm-hmm.
So virgins were kind of highly valued, also mutated virgins. It's all about the rarity and limitations, limited editions. But regarding, for example, Hashmask, I think it's even more interesting than CryptoKitties because it's a type of art where the investors are also part of the art process because, for example, these artworks are unnamed, and the owner can name them, and he can do whatever he wants with them. And he can change the names, things like that. And the names can be given in the next 10 years until there are these NCT tokens that are, it's complicated. So, for example, if you buy that art piece, you can stake it.
Right.
And it gives you some small tokens called NCT, which are name changing tokens.
Right.
And you can spend some of those tokens to change the name to your artwork, or you can decide just to sell those NCT tokens. And so, for example, those artworks will be finished in 10 years. So they're still in the process. There were things done with those artworks, like with Hashmasks, like they were displayed. The ones with the clowns were displayed a couple of weeks ago. On New York Square, in New York, on
like Times
main
Square.
Yeah. Times Square, yes.
Yeah.
And because all the artworks have the number, you could check, like, for example, the people who knew what they were looking at, they could check what it means, because it was so strange having so many clowns, images of different clowns around New York. So, I checked it and I saw that owners decided to change the names to their clowns to the names of the banks. So, for example, that was an art performance or in a sort. So now I have these kind of, and there are so many creative things that people are doing with their own Hashmasks. it's quite interesting if you go deeper into this.
It sounds like a
You
rabbit hole on its own.
Yeah, you can, and they also there are people, there are groups who are so obsessed with this, and they are looking at all the little small traits that no one else has noticed, that they're not, that weren't so visible, and they are making them a rarity by hyping those little traits for some reason. And there is a kind of a mystery and puzzle behind some of the signs and symbols on the images. So it gets people talking and trying to solve all these mysteries. It's kind of gamified and very, very interesting. And I'm not sure, okay, now the trend is, the whole NFT trend has kind of died down since a couple of months ago. And you can see from the Google Trends interest and in general the volume of trading NFTs. And now if you want to issue your art or whatever as an NFT, you're going to have a hard time to sell it. It's going to be very difficult. So right now, people are not so much, except if there are some highly valuable ones and things like that. So right now, it's more kind of waiting their moment. They're going to be, their moment will come again. And I think also for Hashmask, you never know, it might become popular once all those NCT tokens kind of, because they're being burnt. So, in 10 years, I guess maybe there is a possibility that those NCT tokens get a high price, since so few will be available of them for people to, be able to change the names before the projects are finished. And maybe they're going to become the next CryptoPunks or some other successful NFT project.
Once they're finished, so to speak. That was interesting.
Yeah.
They're unnamed, and that creates. I've just wrote down a note here: interactive art. You say it's gamified, but it kind of it makes the art interactive. Even if you're not an artist, you can still participate in the process. In this case, for the next 10 years, by keep changing the name, and it makes the art dynamic in the way you described. So you can do an art performance by changing all the clowns' names to communicate a message. And normally, art does communicate a message, but the message is fixed as a song, and that's it. The lyrics are the lyrics, and the tune is the tune. But with this, because it's moldable, it's very interesting. It's kind of mind-boggling because it's digital. It makes it malleable, but not. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. It's totally mind-blowing. Let's not go too far down that rabbit hole, because that is a whole conversation in itself. But it does beg the question of how. So before I go there, that was digital artworks, and then I was going to talk about collectibles, because we talked about NBA Top Shots. So do you want to just say a word about that? Because I think that's more in the realm of digital collectibles than art, because it's already been created. So give us a quick overview of that one.
Yes, digital collectibles are mostly, right now people are collecting, art can be considered collectibles as well, but the sports items like sport cards, like Sorare with their football cards. So for example, they have a permission from all these different famous football clubs, soccer clubs, to use the images of their players, things like that. And people do buy that, and they value, depending on the number of the NFTs issued per one image and things like that. And also the success of the player, etc. But NBA Top Shots is probably the most popular, NFT project ever. It's been so popular. It's incredible. I think they had like 200,000 people trading those moments of NBA in NBA history. So basically what you get when you buy NBA Top Shot, one of those NFTs, is you get a moment such as, one player shooting or, something from the game.
Something special, yeah.
And something special, some special moments from NBA history, recent or far, and you own that moment, and you can sell it. You can sell that NFT, or you can keep it. That's it.
Yeah, Yeah, just like any piece of art, you can buy it to own it, or buy it because you think it's going to go up in value, or whatever.
Yeah,
The thing about
yeah.
NBA Top Shots though is that that is just adding the NFT thing on top of the existing brand and the existing desirability. I was just going to say that even when I was at school, we used to have sticker books for the Premier League football clubs, and
Hmm.
you'd buy packs of stickers, and there would be two types. There'd be the basic photographs of the players, and then sometimes there would be these foil cards that were like shiny silver ones, right? And they were the rare ones. And of course, your sticker book was like there was this many to collect. So then you would trade them with your friends, and the better players were more desirable, and like the lower mints, if there was only, 5 out of every 1,000 of this particular player printed because he was a hot shot or whatever. So it's just that, but so that's already there, the whole collectible space. But then using the blockchain technology to turn it into these NFTs is the only thing they've added onto that with not intellectual property. With what did they own? They owned the rights to like the photos of the players. They owned the rights to those video clips, and then they've just turned them into a new medium of collectible. So that's just another way of monetizing it, isn't it? That does lead me on to the
It,
question. Go on. Yeah.
for example, what's before, if you wanted to become a owner of one moment, one video from one game,
Mm-hmm.
you will have to receive it on a CD or on a USD and or USB, and I don't know, but still, it's not interesting, and it's not you're not anyone can like this is a blockchain. It's difficult to explain, but this is blockchain, and it has inbuilt provenance into the tokens. So the ownership is transparent as well, and it just simply and also there is a possibility of royalties for the creator or the owner or the, I don't know, maybe football club or someone from each sale to receive this royalty. And it's done with the speed, and everything is automatic and governed by the code and transparent. So it's much better way of transferring ownership, and it also makes more sense for digital things which people obviously do want to own, to do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So with that, but with it being a token, the token can contain lots of different information, like who created the NFT, or who's the if there are any collaborators involved in it. So with NBA Top Shots, you could have the NBA as one of the collaborators. You could have the actual player, and then the team or the manager or whatever, and then you can like share revenue between those people, or whatever it happens to be. With digital artworks, if someone sells a digital image for $100 when it's first made, typically if someone sells that on for 100 million, that's their profit. But like you
Yeah.
say, you can build in these second market royalties into these things, so that every time the ownership of your NFT changes, the one that you created, you get a little like a commission on that every time. So it creates a more sustainable income for artists who
Yes.
aren't famous or popular to begin with, but later on
Now, yeah.
become very famous. And then they 10 years after they painted the painting or whatever, they sells for 100 million and they get none of it. So that is a good one. That's going
Yeah.
to make that's a different way of funding artworks, because traditionally you'd have to in the UK you'd have to go to the Arts Council or look for some sort of government grant to fund an art project, or because there's no free market around art because it's difficult to monetize. Whereas the NFT space makes that much more viable, and it's only possible with this technology in the way we just described, as in having
Hmm.
tracking the provenance and tracking the ownership, and having the currency built in. Like if it's on Ethereum, you can have the money immediately split and sent to the artist, and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of crazy, right? So where that leads me though is, how on earth do NFTs acquire value? Because like any digital item, they're super cheap and super easy to create. So what gives there? Where does the value come from?
Well, it comes from what they represent, you know. Do they represent an in-game item? or which is valued by people, or do they represent an art which is valued by people? And it depends, if it's art, some people may go for an artist and say, okay, I'm going to go for this Banksy Morons NFT, which was, I don't know if you heard about it, but for example, Banksy, some team decided to buy Banksy's image for, I don't remember, maybe 100K. And it's that one where there is a message on the picture written which says, only morons can buy this picture, something like that. And so they bought the physical version of that for 100K, and they burned it, and they minted NFT of that picture. And so it became digital, because the physical version was burned. And they did this because of the message on the image, and only the morons can buy this thing, and as an extension of the art process. And it reached the value as an NFT. It reached a 400K value, I think.
Right.
So it was more valuable as an NFT after extending the art process by burning that as a kind of statement. So there are people who value these stories, because art, no matter how good, it doesn't really become popular unless there are stories to make it popular. Like Mona Lisa has some smile, mysterious smile. There's so many stories in some, I don't know who was the first one to start that kind of narrative like about Mona Lisa and mythology, and it's just building stories. So art is essentially about that, attracting. You have to attract the attention.
I'm totally with you on that. Okay,
it just depends on what people value.
It does. So it's subjective, number one, and number two, it's still the dynamics of supply and demand, because if it's limited in supply, that creates scarcity, and then if on the other side of it that story is compelling, you've got a winner, right? But it's not as simple as that, because what story is going to get people kind of emotionally involved, and then what's the associated artwork that can be minted in a scarce way to create value in the middle? So it's a tension between the two, supply and demand, and the demand comes from the story. And it can't just be, I suppose it could be just a pixel on a piece of on a white background, but you'd have to have a hell of a story to back that up if it wasn't visually impressive as well. But I mean, sky's the limit at the end of the day. The question is, though, that what are the ways to invest in the NFT space? I mean, we've talked about that from like a consumer's point of view. If you or I were going to go shopping for some NFTs and just general chit chat about it, but if you're an investor, crypto investor, why should you care about the NFT space? How do you capture some of this value? Is it something you allocate in your portfolio? You got any thoughts on that? How do you invest in NFTs?
It's a very difficult question, because right now the trend has died down. There were rules about investing a couple of months ago, but they changed. But if you want to play a long-term game, I guess you should go for famous projects and maybe some, CryptoPunks, but they can be, very expensive, or some hash mask, because they're kind of their value has dropped a lot. Or everything is a risk, but I guess it's safer to go, or maybe NBA Top Shots, by picking some of the popular ones whose value has dropped now due to lack of interest, but there is a possibility that there will be a hype again, like it happened with CryptoPunks.
Mm-hmm.
Now CryptoPunks are sold for millions of dollars. So I think it's difficult to say. Even I don't know why, as an investor, I would invest in certain arts. I would buy certain digital artworks because I like them.
Because you like them, right?
And yes, I don't know if they're gonna. I'm not an artist, and I'm not an art expert. But their efforts, for example, of Rarible, I'm not sure if they finished that project or not, but they're going to create a basket, like an index token, which is going to be made of basket of different artists, NFT projects. So it is, it becomes investable for people who are not art experts, but who would like to invest in art which is curated by experts.
And that gives you more chance to capture some value, and you don't have to pick a winner. It's like that, an index fund.
Exactly.
Right? Sure.
Exactly. Also, there are efforts to kind of make NFT market more liquid by creating another layer of tokenization to make it fractional ownership.
Okay, sure.
To give it fractional ownership in percentages or something like that.
Sense. So someone doesn't have to come along with $4 million and buy the CryptoPunk.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Because it only moves when someone's got 4 million or 5 million, and then it's one transaction every 5 years or something stupid. So with fractional ownership, just like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum token, if you could buy $10 worth of a CryptoPunk, and then you'd have a lot more volume.
Yes, but there's so many experiments right now regarding that fractional ownership or making NFTs more liquid. So many projects about that, and we are right now in that experimental phase. Like you have for NFTX project for hash masks, where you can, if your hash mask is not so rare and you want to get rid of it, but there is no liquidity, like the people are not buying it. You can give it to basically lock it inside of this and take some other token inside of this protocol and take some other token, and it means you value it. It's like a floor price for projects. So, for example, if this our project has 10,000 works, and there is a protocol that will make kind of a pool for these floor price projects, and they will be tradable and exchangeable one for another.
Okay,
so many experiments. It's quite complicated right now, but when something interesting comes up, we will be mentioning it on Vice as well.
Well, it's all still being built, all this stuff as well. One thing that just made me think, though, is I just wrote down a question: do people sell art at a loss? Well, I'm sure. Yeah, I guess I never considered that before, which sounds daft, but of course they do. Because if even in the fine art world, if you invested or bought a multi-million-dollar painting, it doesn't stay at the price you bought it at. Of course it doesn't. It fluctuates based on demand. So if I was in financial difficulty and I had a $2 million debt to pay, I might have to sell my painting that I paid $4 million for $2 million if that was the highest price at the time someone was willing to pay for it. Like if I auctioned it off and it only fetched $2 million, well, that's devalued by 50%. So fine art doesn't always go up in value, not necessarily. Even the Mona Lisas of the world won't always just continue to go up in value forever if, for whatever reason, that particular type of art falls out of favor because, I don't know, the story changes, someone unearths some evidence that it was actually Satoshi Nakamoto that painted the Mona Lisa or whatever, right? If the story morphs, the value morphs. So I suppose people would sell CryptoPunks or anything else at a loss if they had to, whatever the market price demands. And that means that any NFT artwork, whatever, CryptoPunk has a fluctuating price. And that means it's A, tradable, like as a trader, and B, that's opens up a possibility to invest in it if you can figure out what the cycles are in terms of how value flows from one type of artwork to another. You look at it when it's undervalued, however you work that out, and then invest in it at that time. So then when it becomes fair market value, you can sell it again. So there's a profit opportunity there that I hadn't considered until you just said what you said. So that would be more like speculating on NFTs. You could buy them as like you say, as a consumer because you wanted to hang it on the wall because you like the artwork. And if that just happens to take off in popularity, you've made money on that, but that wasn't the intention. Did you mention Rarible just now? You're talking about Rarible, which is, I think they've got their own token as well. the Rari token.
Yeah, but that's ERC20 token, just a regular token.
Right.
Yeah, governance token for the Rarible platform. It's not NFT
I know, but isn't that sort of an indirect way of investing in the NFT space by investing in an NFT minting platform like Rarible?
Well, yeah, like you would, if you want to be owner of the marketplace, I mean, to have a sort of governance over some marketplace, it is. But there are many such projects, and people should be very careful when they are picking tokens to invest in, especially that when they are at the peak, when they're overhyped. So now, if they're interested in that area, they should be looking now, or when the price is down, when the hype is down, and pick very carefully.
Yeah. But I figured that would be a more fundamental way of investing in it rather than picking specific artworks. I mean,
I suggest to people to go to either Rarible website or OpenSea website, because those are the biggest marketplaces for NFT artworks, collectibles, etc. And they should just have a look what they have. It's amazing. They're gonna get stuck there and they're gonna be like, oh, I want this, I don't need this, why do I want this? I need to have, it's incredible. Just like you want all of that, even though you don't know what you're gonna do with that.
Absolutely.
And it's gonna be in your wallet, and maybe you can print it for the wall, but some of the artworks are really incredible.
Sure. So I like your index fund idea though, because I'm still sticking to my indirect way of investing in NFTs by buying into a platform. So if, say, there were 5 different NFT minting platforms, like Super Rare is another one, right? Say if there was Super Rare, Rarible, and 3 other platforms that mint and display NFTs in a marketplace, well, I could buy an equal value of those 5 tokens and then put that in my portfolio as an indirect way of getting exposure to the NFT market. Because if then the NFT craze takes off again, well then all or one of those platform tokens is likely to rise as well, and I don't have to pick any particular artwork. I can just invest in the protocol, right? In the same way that, say, I don't know which smart contract application is going to be successful, but I just invest in Ethereum, the protocol, right? And then it doesn't matter, as long as Ethereum is successful, the investment is successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, if you're gonna invest in a marketplace, it's a more complicated story, because it depends also how that token accrues value. What are the value accruals? Is it just the governance? Do you have only governance rights, or there are certain ways of? It's a more complicated story, because it's not just, hey, this is an NFT project, I'm going to invest a couple of those, which are not really, which are ERC tokens. There are thousands of ERC tokens representing some NFT platforms, and it's not that simple to give an advice or to decide like that.
No, I was just saying it's one way of approaching it. It's sort of lower risk, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, just get an exposure rather than trying to pick individual artworks. Okay, cool.
But there is no, like, OpenSea doesn't have their token. I think Super Rare doesn't have their token. I think only Rarible has their token, actually.
Okay, but there we go. Yeah, didn't know
from the large ones, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today. We'll circle back around and talk about NFTs again on another episode. But for now, Marija, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
And that's going to do it for today's edition of the Wise Crypto Sunday Special with me, your host, Chris Coney. So until the next episode, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.